As Alien Earth is just around the corner now, this could possibly be the last trailer we receive. In fact, I hope it is, because from everything I've read in recent interviews, this show will be full of sinister surprises. To add to the growing excitement for August, I have a few important things I'd like to cover about the upcoming show, which I'll discuss in detail with you, including one aspect related to the timeline. Now, I did not expect this at all, and props to the marketing team for leading us all on a wild goose chase. But rather than the story of Alien Earth being set just 2 years prior to 1979's Alien, Noah Hawley, while recently speaking to Collider, now tells us, although there is no precise date, it likely takes place around the events of James Cameron's Aliens. Wait a minute, what? This is a crazy difference, but you know what? I prefer this change. Therefore, with a 50-something year nudge forward in the timeline, this does change everything, and it's actually starting to make much more sense in terms of the knowledge Weyland-Yutani has acquired about the Xenomorph, and why we now see them on Earth. Even Hawley stated that he is unclear whether his story is set slightly before or after Aliens, which took place in 2179. In any case, this new rough date will enable a story to be told that does not interfere with the original film, or other past events, which many may find a blessing, although he also said that some of these past events will be mentioned in the show. So with that being said, and a lot more to consider now, let's take a look at the trailer. But before I do, I just want to thank all of you who supported my last video titled The Three Moons of Calpamos, which is only part 1 of a new series I'm doing. The feedback was amazing, and I appreciate all your kind words. In the early Alien films, androids were portrayed as nothing more than artificial people. Although we all loved Bishop's loyalty to Ripley in the end, and Ash's unpredictability on the surface frightened us almost as much as the alien itself. They never pondered their own existence and what it means to be human. The prequels changed all that with the arrival of David, who developed an obsession with creation. What I admire about this series is that it will tackle the concept of transferring human consciousness into a synthetic form. A child's consciousness because it is more flexible and can adapt. While it's certainly not an original idea in the sci-fi genre, I'm definitely looking forward to learning how intact her mind is after the transfer, what changes may occur after suddenly acquiring an adult female body, and how Wendy will interact with ordinary synthetics. It is possible that the human condition, her intellect and sense of self will expand far beyond the limits of biological confines, once her consciousness is fully integrated into a computer, essentially. I have to assume that Wendy's story arc will also be the emotional heart of the show, especially when considering how involved she seems to become in the numerous close encounters with the vast array of deadly specimens. Not to mention being stuck between a rock and a hard place, referring to Prodigy and Weyland-Yutani, of course. I do like the design of the Maginot now that we can clearly see it. It does slightly remind me of the ship in Man of Steel, but thankfully it has enough design qualities reminiscent of the excellent work by Ron Cobb and Chris Foss, who graced the original films with their extraordinary talents. I'm still maintaining the theory that what we are seeing here is nothing short of sabotage by the ship's android. At least I had assumed him to be one. His translucent arm revealing robotics within may simply be a prosthetic. Additionally, there is an ashtray and lighter next to his bed, so perhaps he's human after all. But throughout the trailers, there is a coldness to this man that simply implies he's up to something, and perhaps a key component attached to the trouble about to commence on Earth. Now forgive me, I'm certainly not blowing smoke up my own arse here, but if you recall an earlier video, I did suggest that the large obstacle we see the ship collide with may have been an early construction of Gateway Station. It was a long shot, as we all thought the show took place just before Alien in 2120. However, now that we know we'll be jumping into the franchise when Earth's main orbiting station has been fully operational for years, this becomes more plausible. That being said, it looks to be quite a distance from Earth and not exactly in orbit, so who knows, perhaps it's not an important detail for now. Again, I do appreciate how they haven't tried to apply too much sci-fi grandeur to Earth cityscapes. It feels grounded and relatable, yet with subtle reminders that it is a future Earth within the Alien universe. Noah Hawley recently discussed the design intentions, stating he wanted to try and steer clear of the Blade Runner franchise, especially since a Blade Runner TV adaptation is on its way, and mimicking another franchise seemed the wrong decision. which I think makes perfect sense, as too much of the same sometimes feels forced. The retro analog aesthetics are in keeping with Alien, and I'm starting to imagine how wonderful it would be if there were a company that sold light switches and control panels in this style for the home. Or is that a little too sad? Alright, we have our first little nasty, and for those of you goody-goodies who prefer plant-based protein, this organism is not an egg, as I initially thought, but a carnivorous plant, given the name D. plumbicare, as shown on screen. It almost sounds cute, but you'd be mistaken. It's tricky to read the description, but I'll highlight some of the key details. It essentially has a lure which is used to attack, attach, and then drag prey into its mouth. It's primarily carnivorous, but can eat other flora in dire situations. Animals given to plumbicare, and this is the unnerving part, have expired in 3 different ways: asphyxiation, dissolving, and exhaustion. It then describes the plant's ability to hibernate in extreme survival conditions, but sadly the text ends there. I don't know what freaks me out more, the slow agonising death one would have to endure, or the fact that this thing also has the capability to move about. Otherwise, how did it attach itself to the ceiling? And knowing this thing can seek you out is quite disturbing to me. It's hard to judge whether something has broken out or broken in with these cryopods. But either way, there is a lot of destruction, a lot of death, and a surprisingly large number of facehugger eggs on board. How did so many eggs appear so quickly? And as Ripley once said,
"So who's laying these eggs?"
I'm not sure.
I'd say it's unlikely to be a queen, as a queen is large and needs space for its ovipositor, which would take time. Then again, in an earlier teaser, one of the specimen statistics listed on the console described the organism as measuring and weighing a considerable amount. The alternatives are that they were manufactured on board using DNA from the first collected specimen, similar to the black goo narrative, which I'm not particularly keen on here. Or there is the egg morphing theory, which has never been shown on film, but I suppose Romulus sort of came close. I actually feel quite sorry for this little dude, but I'm sure he's just the first in a long line of victims. Now, I imagine most of us understand what has happened to him by now. The creature named T. ocellus, which I described in another video, has extracted and replaced the goat's eyeball, and in the process has made itself a new home. The bigger question, I suppose, would be how not on Earth would nature allow evolution to create such horrors? But if we limit our scope to just the scene in question, then what is the purpose of this disturbing process? Evidently, this creature thrives in and feeds from a living host. But does this mean the host remains itself whilst carrying this parasite inside? Is the host even aware of its new stowaway after the process completes? It would be slightly awkward showing up to work the next day with one eye significantly larger than the other, and not knowing why as people stare in horror. However, in the animal kingdom, I wonder if the host now has an expiry date, as this parasite slowly drains its life. The other intriguing possibility would be if the parasite were capable of overriding the brain and essentially taking full control of the host. Or at the very least, it might have some considerable influence over the organism's decision-making and personality traits. The scene here adds even more intrigue to this elusive organism, because unless I'm mistaken, it seems to be doing what it does, but this time on an artificial lady. If this biological parasite can synchronize with an android, then, well, I'm not even going to speculate on the weird possibilities that could entail, because usually androids are left alone in this franchise. Well, mostly. The thing is, there does seem to be a strong theme of biology merging with mechanics in this show, or the franchise as a whole, to be honest. So will this fleshy creature merge with the world of cybernetics, perhaps? And here comes the money shot, people, the end scene of a fairly non-spoilerish trailer that everyone is talking about. There are a few things I want to discuss at this point, and I'll start with the fact that this is probably the first time we have ever seen a xenomorph that is lit by natural light. Maybe that's a weird thing to say, but considering every time we've briefly seen them, they've always been in a ship or a facility shrouded by darkness. There's just something equally majestic and immeasurably unsettling about seeing the xenomorph in such a familiar setting, and masterfully lit by the sun's rays. Not only is it a glorious sight to behold, but it also drives home the sense of urgency and despair. That what-if scenario if one of those things were to get loose. Once again, Ripley called it, if you remember.
God damn it, that's not all! Because if one of those things gets down here, then that will be old. And all this bullshit that you think is so important, you can just kiss all of that goodbye.
I would even argue that, in some ways, the Earth setting shares a lot of DNA with the other films. The Nostromo was just as identifiable to audiences because if you never saw its exterior, if you didn't know it was in space, it could have just been a factory of some kind. This familiarity is what makes you feel unsettled when things go bad. On a side note, the reason the Xeno is sporting a new colour is that Hawley wanted to make a slight design change. The reason is he felt that the ribcage of the original Alien was a little too human and highlighted the look of a man in a suit too much. Not only did he alter this aspect to something more akin to the runner in Alien 3, but he also sought to move away from the black and introduce a more cockroach-like colouring for the beast. And you know what? No arguments from me, I think it looks fresh, and I can always welcome the very subtle changes. Noah gave some fantastic answers to questions regarding his show in the recent Collider interview linked below. And honestly, every time I hear him speak, I find myself becoming filled with promise as we get ever closer to August the 12th. The reason is that he sounds like an incredibly hard-working, immensely creative and intelligent Alien fan, who is excited to share with the world his baby. As I said, I'll link the articles in the description below if you want to read the whole thing, but I'll just highlight a few points that stood out to me. He talks about huge sequences where all we are seeing is the Xenomorph. The films at best gave these creatures 2 to 3 seconds of screen time every now and then, but Alien Earth will spoil us with all the deadly organisms it has to offer. He describes how incredible the performer wearing the Xenosuit is, as well as the outstanding work by the stunt team. One detail that stood out was the description of how advanced their use of practical effects has become. They have countless animatronic facehuggers and even eggs that work in the same way. But what was super impressive to me was when he spoke about how far they have come from a man in a costume walking slowly, due to the suit's restriction. During the filming, they were able to combine human acrobatics with wirework and animatronics to enable the Xenomorph to literally fly from wall to wall without the use of CG. This is exactly what I want to hear, but I hope the creatures feel grossly visceral enough and not as sterile as they sometimes felt in Romulus. During that film, I sometimes felt like they were showcasing the alien like a car show would display a Ferrari, and that was never the case in the original. Now, I realise what made Alien so scary was much to do with what we didn't see. But as Noah Hawley says himself, Alien shocked audiences with the horrific life cycle process that culminated in an 8-foot monster. Alien shocked us once more with the revelation of an egg layer. There are no more surprises, sadly, and that initial shock value can only be experienced once. This is why he has incorporated new species with disgusting abilities and a violent life cycle of their own, to revive that primeval fear and repulsion we once experienced the first time we watched these films. It's genius really, but that doesn't mean the OG beast is dead, with more screen time for the main villain than ever before, and with the stunning practical application of filming it to navigate, whilst immersed in a setting familiar to us but quite alien to the films. We're in for a treat, people, I can feel it. So we are just a few weeks away from 8 hours of new Alien content, and I'm beyond excited. Let me know in the comments if I've missed anything in the trailer and how you feel about the show, being on the cusp of potentially something very big and important for the franchise. Take care folks, Dude signing off.